Hello, and welcome to the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training. We're a joint labor management organization that administers education and training programs for CSEA represented New York State employees. We are funded through negotiated agreements between New York State and CSEA. Our mission is to promote career mobility, improve job skills, support workplace safety and health, and promote effective labor management relations. These union negotiated benefits are available at no cost to you as eligible members, so we encourage you to make the most of our offerings. The goal of this video is to provide an overview of the partnership and help you identify the programs and services that best support your professional goals. We offer education and career advisement, tuition benefits, career and skill development courses, certificate and traineeship programs, as well as programs and services that require labor management approval.
My name is Todd Moorman. I'm the president of Dynamic Training, which is located in New York City. Dynamic Training does work all throughout New York State, as well as some of the contiguous states. A lot of work in communication skills, leadership, supervision, and those types of topics. Certainly job etiquette is a very important topic, so I'm really happy that the partnership had the vision to create this webinar, and I'm really pleased to deliver it for all of you today. So I want to start off today by asking a question. Why do you think we should care about job etiquette? Lots of great themes around teamwork, respect, professionalism, working cooperatively and more easily with others. So these are all the key themes that we would certainly associate with job etiquette. So when we're speaking about job etiquette at its simplest, I think we're talking about mutual respect. It can take the form of manners, as many of you had mentioned, or politeness, but it often goes deeper than that. So you want to consider it to be more or less a set of rules, a simple set of simple rules that help us work more cooperatively and get along with one another in the workplace. And if we don't have good job etiquette in the workplace, we wouldn't be able to get all of the wonderful things done that we get done for the public, etc. So we're really going to spend our time together talking about the various ways we can strengthen our own approach to job etiquette. So we have a number of objectives, as you can see on the slide, that we hope to accomplish with you today. So we hope that you'll have a good, strong sense of what a suitable attire is for your workplace. You probably have a good sense of that already, but we may give you a few finer points related to that. We're going to talk about appropriate behaviors for both personal workspaces and shared workspaces. So many of you have both of those, and we want to talk about some specific behaviors to ensure that we're exhibiting appropriate etiquette with respect to those. And then finally, we're going to look at some general etiquette tips for the workplace. So here is our agenda for our time together. First, we're going to focus on your appearance. How do you ensure that you have a professional appearance and what that looks like for your specific role? And then after that, we'll talk about etiquette in both personal and shared workspaces. And then we're going to end our time together by talking about some general etiquette tips and taking a deeper dive into the role of social media in the workplace and some of the etiquette considerations around that. Regardless of your job, your professional appearance is how you look to others when you're working. In some cases, professional appearance might be regulated. Many of you may have to wear uniforms, or probably most of you have dress codes that are in policy. Some departments have them, not all of them do, but most offer some kind of dress guidelines. Sometimes they may be limited, sometimes they may be more specific, but the focus is on presenting a favorable image. And as a state employee, you want to ensure that you're projecting a favorable image and you appear professional to the public if you are working directly with the public. You want to be taken seriously and you want to certainly position yourself or be a candidate for career mobility. And you also have to think about safety. So for many of you, you're working maybe in a direct care setting or you're working in operations. A couple of folks from parks I saw, some folks from healthcare. So certainly those types of positions and others, it's important to be thinking about safety considerations in those kinds of roles. We really are focused on individuals of all backgrounds and all sorts of jobs across New York State. And certainly, depending on where you work and what you actually do, what's considered appropriate may vary considerably. So let's talk about the categories of appropriate attire, and you see those listed here. So the first might be scrubs. And as we know, these are often worn by staff in direct care facilities. They include proper footwear, and of course, those uniforms allow them to do their jobs safely. Uniforms, the more umbrella category, really any of you who are required to wear a particular uniform as part of your job. It might be as simple as t-shirts and jeans for folks from OGS or parks employees, or it might be uniforms for our kitchen or food preparation staff in certain facilities. And then the third category is casual or business casual attire. And this category we know is typically for those folks who are working in an office setting. And there's probably a wider range of what's considered acceptable in this category. It might include jeans, it might include slacks, polos, blouses, etc. So in addition to considering the types of clothes to wear to work, you also want to make sure that you're neat and clean. So if you have a beard or a mustache, make sure it's trimmed. And depending on your job, you might also want to keep your nails short, particularly for those healthcare workers. And you want to avoid a lot of accessories, such as watches or jewelry. Well, those things sometimes might get in the way of the work that you need to do. If you're well groomed and you're dressing appropriately, you'll be treated more professionally. That's really the bottom line. It also just feels good. If you look good, you feel good, as they say, and that's what we're going for here. There are certainly some things that are more or less universally or generally unacceptable things that should never be worn in the workplace. So this might include clothing, footwear, or accessories that might be dirty or stained. They might be ripped, torn, wrinkled, too tight or revealing, covered with words or logos, the pictures or things that might be considered offensive by some folks. And then, of course, things that might be unsafe for your job. If you're working in the trades or in operations or in maintenance or in direct care, that's a whole other consideration, as we had said. And again, if you have any questions about what might be appropriate, just check with your supervisor. So now that we've covered this topic, we want to ask you, which of these items do you think you probably should avoid wearing in any workplace, even if it's a casual Friday? As we've said, it depends on your workplace, what's appropriate, but for ripped jeans, probably safe to say it's universally a bad idea. It not only presents an unprofessional image, but it might also be a safety hazard. Those things could snag on equipment or tools. Speaking of safety hazards, even jewelry might be another safety hazard, particularly those items that dangle. Button-up shirts, of course, generally safe items. And finally, in terms of sneakers, we know they're generally considered a safe choice for casual Friday. And there may be some workplaces, however, where safety shoes are required, or agencies on a different note that dealing with the public might require more formal attire even on Fridays. So again, the point here is no one size fits all. You want to be thinking about what's appropriate for your individual workplace and what's safe. All right, so our next topic is workspaces. And again, we work in a variety of environments, so there are different kinds of workspaces. Many of us are working in cubicles or open floor plan offices. Some of you might be at a nursing station if you're in a direct care facility. You might work in a workshop, a group home, a residency, a mailroom, many different kinds of environments. So your workspace gives your coworkers and the people around you impressions of the type of person you are. So you want to make sure that it presents a favorable impression. And that means you want to keep it tidy, clean. You want to make sure papers are filed, it doesn't look cluttered. It might not always seem fair, but people will form impressions based upon the way your space looks, and the way you organize and manage your workspace really contributes to the overall feeling in your office. So you want to keep that in mind. Regardless of the type of workspace you have, we do have some tips that may help you in thinking about that space. So the first tip is the most important, is keeping it clean and well organized. Like your appearance, your workspace is a reflection, as we had said. So a good way to do this is to spend a few minutes at the end of the workday, cleaning things up, trying to set yourself up for the following day. Take out any trash, remove any recycling, give your workspace a quick wipe down. This is important also because you don't want to attract any pests or rodents. Make sure everything has a home or a designated space, and then you put things back when you're done using them. You also want to keep noise to a minimum. So keep in mind, most workspaces aren't soundproof. So try to avoid talking loudly over cubicle walls. Have those private conversations in private, not in an open workshop. Take phone calls appropriately, not on speakerphone. Use headphones if you're going to listen to music. So all of those things are certainly important, keeping noise to a minimum. And so that leads us to our third tip for all of you, which is to be courteous of others' workspaces. Don't interrupt others at their desk or cubicle. Make sure you try to wait until they're not busy and then approach them and let them know what it is that you need to discuss with them. If they're on the phone or they appear to be in a virtual meeting, but you're not sure, play it on the safe side. Come back at a later point or use technology as many of you had suggested. If you share a workspace, the same rules of cleanliness and organization apply. Shared workspaces might be a nursing station, a workshop, a reception desk, any of those kinds of spaces. You want to make sure you're taking a little extra time to clean up after yourself, particularly if a coworker is going to be using the space right after you. Make sure you're speaking with your coworkers and you agree on some sort of an organizational pattern or framework. And that way you're not reshuffling your workspace every single time you try to begin working. If you happen to work remotely, or perhaps from a different location on some days of the week, make sure that your additional workspaces are also kept neat and orderly. Be aware of any wall hangings and artwork that might show during a video call. And also make sure you're dressed appropriately for those kinds of meetings. And that's particularly important if you end up having impromptu virtual meetings. You want to be prepared by being dressed appropriately. And speaking of impromptu meetings, we should also talk a little bit about phone etiquette. So we all, of course, well, most of us, I'm sure, are answering the phone at one point or another while at work. Some of us are probably answering it a lot, depending upon our work responsibilities. And for those of you, of course, fall into that category, we hope that this section is a review for you. And for the rest of us who might only be answering the phone occasionally, we're just going to discuss the basic rules of courtesy that apply to the use of the telephone. So whenever you can, of course, you want to take personal phone calls in a more private space than your own workspace. For those of you who don't have a private office, just remember, nobody wants to overhear half of a private phone call, or the full thing for that matter. As we said, no speakerphones. If you do need to take a private phone call that deals with sensitive information, try to find a space that's appropriate for that, like an empty meeting room. Make sure you confirm first that it's going to be empty for as long as you anticipate the call going, or take the call outside, or perhaps in your car. But even in that situation, you want to remember that cars aren't soundproof either, and folks walking by might hear you. So if you're talking about something that's super confidential, then you might want to wait until you're in a more secure or private location in order to have that conversation. And if, despite all of this advice, you yourself can hear a coworker having a private conversation, try to do them the courtesy of not listening in, not interrupting, or commenting on the conversation. And it probably all seems like it goes without saying, but if anyone needs the reminder, the bathroom and other shared spaces are not appropriate places to take a phone call. So we will move on and talk about shared spaces, which also can take many forms. It might be a kitchen, a break room, a bathroom. These are areas, of course, that you need to share with your colleagues, and they're prone to get a little bit messy from time to time. So we want to think about that. And we'll talk about a number of tips related to that. But before we do so, we want you to take a moment to think about something that annoys you. Think about something that annoys you or irritates you about using shared spaces and give us a sense of what that might be. So we will move on and talk about shared spaces, which also can take many forms. It might be a kitchen, a break room, a bathroom. These are areas, of course, that you need to share with your colleagues, and they're prone to get a little bit messy from time to time. So we want to think about that. And we'll talk about a number of tips related to that. But before we do so, we want you to take a moment to think about something that annoys you. Think about something that annoys you or irritates you about using shared spaces and give us a sense of what that might be. You want to be thinking when you take a look at this list, you want to be honest with yourself and ask yourself, have I ever done any of these things before? Maybe unintentionally, without knowing it, without knowing that it would bother somebody. So try to ask yourself that question. It just goes to show that the things that tend to bother some folks might not have been intentional. So it's really a good idea to give people the benefit of the doubt in these situations. A good example of this might be if somebody in your office maybe takes the last cup of coffee in the morning and doesn't put on a new pot, and you go to get a cup of coffee, and of course you're irritated. How could somebody do this? At least in some situations, it's at least possible that the person who does that might not realize that everybody has to do that individually. They might just think that it's somebody else's role or job responsibility to make a new pot of coffee. So that's actually happened in a number of settings. And so that person's not really intentionally trying to be difficult or violating the rules of etiquette. So keep that in mind and try to give folks the benefit of the doubt before you assume the worst. So most of us share some kind of a break room. A lot of you share kitchens as well, and we appreciate those spaces, of course. Try to make the most of the space. And in order to do that, you want to be considerate of your coworkers and make sure that you clean up after yourself, and leave everything more or less where you found it. If you eat food in the kitchen or the break room, make sure you wipe down any surfaces. Somebody put in there, I don't like to see grease stains. So try to clean those things up before the next person comes. Um, as I had said when you were making your comments, food particles or grease stains, those things have the potential to breed bacteria. So it's really important, again, not just from an aesthetic consideration, but also a health consideration to wipe those kinds of surfaces down and keep them clean. If you use a dish, don't leave it in the sink. Pack it away for home or wash it in the moment, dry it and put it right away when you're done with it. Make sure you don't leave food in the sink either, or in the drain catch, or stuck on a sponge. All of those things have health issues, and they also, can start to get a bad odor as well. So keep that in mind. Make sure you keep an eye on supplies. If you're using the last of something, whether it's paper towels, soap, paper cups, silverware, you want to make sure you let somebody else know so that those things can be restocked. Supplies are there for all of us to use, of course, but they're not unlimited and they're not free. So also try to use them in moderation. If you are lucky enough to have a refrigerator or a microwave in your shared space, we have some suggestions to keep in mind. First, you want to be mindful of strong food odors. Probably not a good idea to bring that leftover fish in and heat it up in the microwave. Or if you burn your popcorn in the microwave, remember the kitchen and maybe even the entire workspace is going to smell like that for the remainder of the day. So try to avoid doing that. Watch it closely. Label your food and other stored items so your coworkers don't inadvertently take your property. Be mindful of expiration dates and food spoilage, as it can create bad odors and bacteria, as we had said. If your food spills, explodes, or otherwise makes a mess in the microwave, the toaster, the refrigerator, all of these items, clean up after yourself. If a stain sits there, it gets harder and harder to clean it. We know that. It's just harder to get it removed. If you do it in the moment, it comes off much more easily. Nobody wants to show up and try to put something in the microwave and have all kinds of, food dried on the surface there. So be mindful of that. Don't leave your food unattended in the microwave or toaster. Really important also as a etiquette consideration when multiple folks are using that or it's a meal time. You don't want folks to have to take your food out so they can put their food in. So try to be aware of the timing issues here. Now, let somebody know if an appliance is broken or you have a safety concern about something that's older. And finally, it may go without saying, but make sure you don't misuse any of the appliances in your space. Make sure you use only microwave safe materials, no metal. Also want to be careful about putting any ice cold glass dishes into the microwave because they may have the potential to crack. All right, so since the pandemic and probably even before that, many of us eat lunch at our desks rather than gathering together in a shared break room or other space. And if you do this, make sure you clean up that workspace and you're not leaving out dirty dishes or food that could attract pests. Nobody wants to find ants or worse yet, a mouse. Be aware of smells in those spaces as well, just like in the kitchen. So make sure you do what you need to do to prevent those. And bathrooms, which seemed like it was an important topic based on your comments. A lot of folks leave those spaces kind of messy. So depending on how many people are sharing the bathrooms in your space, it's of course can be difficult. It can be difficult to maintain its cleanliness throughout the course of the day, even if there is some sort of regular maintenance. Try to do your part by cleaning up after yourself. Don't leave splashed water on the sink or soap residue on the counter. Grab a paper towel and just wipe it up. It only takes a moment. Also, if you notice that supplies are running low, whether that's paper towels or soap or toilet paper, let somebody know. You might have to ask around, figure out who needs to be notified in your workspace, but make sure you do that. Certainly not a good feeling to show up and be looking for paper towels or those kinds of things and be left without it. So you could put a sign also on a bathroom stall if it's out of toilet paper and it's not going to get restocked quickly. So little things like that are good ways of demonstrating appropriate etiquette. And as we had said before, bathrooms are not a good place to take phone calls or conduct private conversations. So make sure you avoid doing so. Other shared workspaces are going to vary depending upon where you work. Some of you, as we had noticed in the comments, have conference rooms where you may use those spaces for personal phone calls or other items or other or meetings for what have you. You may have smaller meeting rooms. You may have outdoor spaces. And many of you are from parks. Wherever you are, the message remains the same. Clean up after yourself once you're done using the space. It's also best practice to return the room or the space to however you found it. That might mean moving tables or chairs back to their original location. It might mean taking out the trash or the recycling or disposing of it in proper bins. First, some quick reviews. Of course, we said dress appropriately for the job that you have. That means being neat, clean, and professional. Clothes, shoes, and accessories. You want to make sure all of those allow you to do your job efficiently and safely. You want to be considerate, and of course that means being thoughtful of your coworkers, of their rights and their feelings. That's the kind of umbrella guideline here for etiquette. You don't want to cause inconvenience or any harm to your coworkers. And this tip is really going to serve you well regardless of the general area, whether it's shared spaces, whether it's working independently in your cubicle or being in a meeting or on a project, and probably even in your personal life. One natural extension of being considerate is to be mindful of your language. You want to avoid swearing. It's generally unacceptable in the workplace. It might even be more than unacceptable. It might result in disciplinary action in many settings. It might be appropriate or acceptable around your social network, your friends, but it certainly doesn't make you look like a good communicator at work, even if it's somehow tolerated. And it's an important skill to be aware of. Vulgar language could lead to an harassment claim and disciplinary action and be considered offensive by many folks. So good idea to avoid this universally. And you also want to just be polite, avoid slang, avoid jargon, and avoid any language that others might consider offensive or derogatory. We also want to think about body language. We know in our country, we tend to expect folks to use a relaxed posture, keep a straight back, maintain eye contact. And that's not the same in every culture. You know, in other cultures, as an example, eye contact, direct eye contact is considered a sign of disrespect. So you want to, in general, avoid rolling your eyes. Obviously, that connotes something pretty negative. You want to avoid checking your watch or your phone while somebody's talking to you. That's a popular one that we see anymore now. You want to be respectful of people's personal space as well. There's some cultural issues around that. So ask yourself, am I standing too close to somebody? Am I making them uncomfortable? So be aware of those kinds of considerations. Try to, be aware of other people's body language. They can usually tell you in their body language if they're uncomfortable with something that you're doing. Our third tip is to show respect for the spaces you share with others. Again, we had spent a fair amount of time talking about this. So whether it's meeting rooms, break rooms, or bathrooms, just make sure you replace supplies, you clean up after yourself, all of the things that we had mentioned. The fourth tip is probably one of the most important ones these days. Don't let these distract you while you are at work. And for that matter, don't let them distract you in your personal life either. No matter what workspace you have, whether it's personal, shared, or at home, we know these devices have the potential to be very distracting. So don't text while somebody is talking to you. I think somebody had put that in the chat when we asked for your general etiquette tips. Don't pull out your phone or pull up your email while you're in a meeting or in a conversation. It's really rude to do things like that. So try to be on top of that. So let's talk about meeting etiquette in a little bit more detail. So the phone thing is one part of that, but there are other tips that we want to address as well. Most of us, as part of our jobs, have to attend meetings throughout the day or the week. And we know meeting etiquette is probably fairly straightforward, but let's quickly review some of these. So first, you want to be on time. If you're not going to be on time, let folks know. But when you aren't on time, you remember you're giving the impression that your time is more valuable than that of the other folks in attendance. Getting to a meeting on time shows respect. It shows consideration for your coworkers and the process of the meeting. And when you're late, you're holding other folks up from doing what they need to do. Also, you want to come prepared to the meeting. You may need to bring materials with you, as maybe it includes the meeting agenda or pen and paper, materials that were sent to you in advance, or what have you. And also don't forget your calendar in the event that a meeting needs to get scheduled or something else needs to get scheduled during the meeting. And try to avoid leaving early. You want to attend the entire meeting. And really only leave early if it's absolutely necessary. And if you know that in advance, try to let the people who are running the meeting know that as well so that they can anticipate it. So we have another question for you. Are there ever times when you think it's appropriate to have your phone out during a meeting? Some folks try to say sometimes, well, if you're checking work email, but even in those situations, that should be the exception rather than the rule. It's really not appropriate to do that during a meeting. Most emails can wait. Maybe, if you're in a supervisory position, there might be an exception, but you want to try to avoid those kinds of situations. But I can tell you, as someone who presents, the number of times I see a phone under the table, most folks think that they can be sneaky and they can be having their phone underneath the table and out of view, and nobody's going to know. But we all know the secret is not really a secret. So avoid that kind of behavior. It's really obvious to everyone in the room what you're doing. And if it's a virtual meeting and your camera's off, it's also obvious because you can tell when people's eyes are glanced down, and it's really only a matter of time in those situations before someone might ask you a question and you won't be able to answer it because you weren't really paying attention in that moment. So if you're in a meeting, be present. If you're expecting an important or urgent call, let the meeting organizer know, as we had said. Slip out if you need to. You get that call from the doctor or a family member. I've seen folks think they can take that call right in the space. Make sure you step out of the room as quickly as possible. And if possible, don't answer the phone until you get out of the room so you don't create any kind of additional distraction. So before we get into our last tip, we have another question for you. Do you think it's ever appropriate to vent or rant about your workplace or coworkers on your private social media account? The truth is, of course, it's never appropriate. You might get away with it, but if you're friends with some coworkers and not others, your post may find its way to the wrong set of eyes and you could end up regretting it. We know over the last several years, we've really seemed to have forgotten that the internet is forever. It doesn't go away. So it's nearly impossible to fully get rid of something we've posted or commented on. And even if you delete the post, others may have already taken screenshots. So be careful of what you put on social media and know that posting negative comments about work is never, ever, ever a good idea. So our final tip is to be careful with social media, whether that's Facebook or other sites. They're a good way to connect with folks, but remember that your supervisors and your coworkers might use them also. So don't criticize coworkers on social media. Just like we don't criticize them at work, certainly don't do it on social media sites. The information can get back to those folks and harm your working relationship. Posts that speak too specifically about work are also a bad idea and can cause damage to your professional reputation, and it might also cause damage to the reputation of your agency or facility. So take, for example, the American Red Cross, who had someone post on social media on their site about getting drunk, and it was the official Red Cross account. They were able to get the message down, but they probably weren't too happy about that, and probably a number of folks saw it before it actually got taken down. So those are good examples to keep in mind.